So hello and welcome to my festive felt tutorial for my fellow felt lovers. I'm going to show you how to make one of the little Christmas cakes that I've got on display at the Hitching Christmas Tree Festival this weekend in aid of Willow Foundation. So we have a list of things we're going to need. So needles and cotton, embroidery floss, it'll be whatever colour cake you want to make. So I'm doing strawberry, so I've got some pinks. They don't necessarily match the pink felt, but it doesn't matter. I think it all adds to the fun of the little cake. So you'll need felt sheets in colours of your choice. So we're using pinks, and I also want to put a strawberry on the top. So I've got some red and green and some white to make a bit of whipped cream. We've got stuffing. This is just hollow fibre stuffing from Dunelm, but I have in the past actually cut open teddy bears and pulled their innards out. They've got the hollow fibre inside of those too, so that's a way to get around that. You'll need some cardboard. Now you won't see the cardboard, so I've just used a Rice Krispies packet, and that's just to give strength inside the cake, otherwise it bulges out and you want it to have a bit of structure, so that's needed there. You'll need a bit of PVA glue just to attach the felt for the side pieces. Optional beads, sequins, anything that you fancy. Now I collect, because I'm a bit of a hoarder, I collect bits of broken jewellery and sequins. People give me things. I've got old bows and roses and buttons, all sorts of things. So old jewellery is a good way to find them, or you can buy sequins and things from places like Hobbycraft. So that's those. You'll need some scissors. I've got paper scissors and fabric scissors because my mother would not be happy if I used fabric scissors on paper. And you also will need some ribbon to hang it up at the end. So I've just got one that says Merry Christmas on it, but you can just use plain or pink or whatever colour you like. And then a piece of paper just to cut out the initial shapes. Now, I don't use a pattern for anything that I do. I'm very ad hoc and just tend to wing it with these things. So I haven't got a pattern for you to download, but I can show you how to make one really easily. So we're going to need a triangular piece for the bottom, a triangle with a flap on the back which will raise up to make the back, and a long piece which will bend to create the side pieces. So 3 pieces, and you can make it as big or small as you like. So let's go with this. So I'm thinking I kind of want it that big, so I'm going to cut a piece of my paper, fold them in half, long ways. And then what I want to do is just bear in mind that I want to keep an end piece. So I want to cut a triangle 1/2 inch down to this side. So you'll end up with a shape like that, which you can open, and that will give you your cake shape. Now this to me is too wide, so I'm just going to trim that back a bit. So you can just play with your cakes and make them into what you want them to be. So that's better. So then I will just fold up along this line here. And that will give you your template for the back of the cake and the bottom. So you want to cut this shape out of card. You'll also want to then cut that back piece off and cut this shape out of card. And you're also going to need a strip that's that long. So you want it to go round your cake. So that's the length of it. So you just measure it by doing 2 of the side pieces, and that'll give you your length. And the width of this will be the same width as the height of your cake. So now we've got our 2 pieces of paper, we can draw around these onto our cardboard and get the basic pattern. It doesn't matter too much if these are straight, because when you cut the felt, you'll cut it wider. So now we want a piece of card that includes the back of the cake on it. And then we're going to cut the back off. And we want to draw around the triangle and cut all of those out. So now you've got the pieces of card that will go inside your cake. You want to just score a line down the back part of the bottom of the cake. I just use the backs of my scissors and just press down carefully, and that will just give you a sort of scored line. So that will fold up. So you can see how you're starting to get your cake shape. This one you'll fold in half. That will sit in here, and this will go on top. So let's move on to cutting out the felt. So we can just put our cardboard onto the felt, just leave a little bit of a gap around the edge, and we can draw around. And then we'll cut the pieces out, but we'll go just slightly over the edge of the line so that we've got a little bit of play to stitch with. Okay, so we've got all our pieces cut out. So that one goes in there, that one goes in there, that one goes on here. Now we're going to want to glue this one down, but before we do that, if you want to put a strip of jam along the edge of your cake, now's the time to do that, unless you want to glue it on afterwards. But I'm just going to do a back stitch and stitch it along first before I glue it to the cardboard, otherwise we won't be able to stitch through it. So I'm going to use a little bit of the darker strawberry colour, and I want it to be the same length as this. But I want to make a wobbly edge so it looks like jam is coming out of the cake. So I'm just going to cut kind of wavy shape. You don't need a pattern for this. There we go. So now we have a piece of jam. So we can run that along the middle of here. So I'm going to use an embroidery thread just to do a back stitch along here. It's not quite the right colour, but I like that contrast, so that's what we're going to go with. It's all just about having fun. Now a little trick with embroidery floss, if you take it from about your fingertip to about the crook of your elbow, that's roughly a good size to work with. Otherwise you start to get tangled up and it can knot itself behind and you can get in a bit of bother with it. So that's a good tip. I'm just going to thread my needle and I am going to knot it at the end. So to do a back stitch, they're very simple. You come up into your felt, then you go back and come up ahead of your stitch. So you go in behind the stitch and out ahead of it. And repeat. So you go back to the start of this one, behind the stitch, up ahead of it. And what this does, rather than a running stitch, which is in and out like this, a running stitch will pucker, whereas a back stitch won't do that. It will keep it has a lot more integrity as it goes, so this won't pucker up as you work with it. So I'm going to run a back stitch along here just to attach the jam to the cake. So I'm just going to come up behind the fabric, go through both pieces of felt, go back to the beginning and up ahead. So if you come to the end of your thread, you can just tie it off at the back and start again with a fresh piece. So you just come through to the back, and if you push the back of your needle under, you can, and then loop it through, you can make a little knot against that last stitch. So that's secure, and we can cut that off and then just start again with a new piece. So just with the back of the needle underneath the last stitch you made and make a knot. Do that a couple of times. And so we've got our jam filling on the side of our cake. So now we can glue this onto our cardboard. So I just get my PVA, and I've just got a piece of cardboard that I'm going to spread it with. So you just want a thin layer across the whole of the cardboard. Don't need tons, it's just to stick it down. And then this will stick onto your piece of felt. I always put it so that the blank of the card is facing out. I've never had it that you can see through it, but I wouldn't want sort of snap, crackle and pop appearing through the side of the cake, so I keep them facing inward. And then that will just fold like that. So now you've got your jammy sides of your cake. Now we want to do the bottom and the back part of the cake. So I'm going to glue this one on. Then we're going to pop that onto the felt. There, so you can see how it's starting to build up. We've got our back and bottom. Sides will fit on here. So I'll show you with this. So what we're going to do is start on the inside of the two pieces. So that knot will now be hidden, and then we're just going to bring it over and go back in. And that's our starting stitch. So all you do is come over half a centimetre, not even that, a few millimetres over, back in through both, away from yourself. And as you put it through, you'll find that you have a loop. And all you do is tuck your needle under the loop, pull through, and there you're starting to get your blanket stitch. Move over, in through both, find your loop there, take your needle under, and just continue that way, and you'll end up with a blanket stitch around the edge, which is a nice decorative stitch and nice and sturdy. So quite small, and come in from the back. There, so that's your blanket stitch. So we'll run that along, and remember that it comes to that corner as you lift it up. So we'll start here and work our way around with the blanket stitch. So remember, you go inside and then hide that knot, make your securing stitch, and then off we go. So I'm going the other way than I did with the tutorial part, but it doesn't matter. So away, little loop, back through towards yourself, pull tight, and just continue that all the way around. And sometimes you'll need to just trim the corners, and that's completely fine. So we're just going to continue our blanket stitch and pull these together. into this shape. So you can see now why you need to leave that little gap, because you're going to have to sew through this edge. So I absolutely love making these. Once you've kind of got it down, got the pattern down, there's no real end to the variations that you can do. So I've done a carrot cake, lemon. I want to do a walnut one, but I've got to figure out how to make a felt walnut. I'm not quite. I feel like you could probably bunch some up. Or maybe pecan, that might work. What else have I done? I did a pavlova. So I did lots and lots of sort of meringue, a couple of different styles of meringue. And then I did a watermelon cheesecake, because I had needle felted a watermelon and I wasn't really sure how I could use it. So I thought I'll make, I don't know if it's a true pudding actually, but my fairy tale watermelon cheesecake. So I made that. Now I'm going to trim that end off just to match the bend, the curve of this. So what I'm going to do is just end this stitch by doing another finishing stitch there. I'm just going to trim the end of that into a slight curve. And I'm also going to take the end of the cardboard off. So this is my second time exhibiting at the Hitchin Christmas Tree Festival. I won a category last time I did it. I can't remember what the category was. I'll have to dig out the little certificate that I got. But last time I did a tree called Victoriana, and it was all little floral. They were abstract florals inspired by kind of Victorian posies. I kind of updated them by putting neon on them and things like that. But they're really pretty. I think I've got one here. Let me show you. They were these. So they were all on velvet, and they're sort of floral. There's a bit of needle felting and things like that, really three-dimensional. So they're actually quite a lot like the tops of the cakes in the end, with these kind of 3D beading and things like that on them, sequins and whatnot. So yeah, I won my category that year with that one. Yeah, so I'm doing it in aid of the Willow Foundation, which is a fantastic charity which provides special days, special memories for kind of younger adult age group, which is not always catered for that so specifically. So it's for 18 to 40-year-olds, providing sort of like bucket list ideas really, and they'll provide special day at home for people who can't get out of the house, special baskets, and so people will write in with their wish, and then Willow will try to fulfill that for them. So there's some lovely stories on the website that you can look at. But it was set up by Arsenal legend Bob Wilson and his wife Megs, in memory of their daughter Anna, who passed away at the age of 31. And so we have 8 shops across Hertfordshire, raising funds to provide these special memories, special days for young adults. And it's open to everybody in the country, not just people in Hertfordshire. So it's a lovely charity, and the shops are beautiful and welcoming, and it's a lovely, lovely place. So that's what my tree is for this year. Right, so I'm just going to cut the corner there because I feel like it's sticking out slightly. You can do, if you need to adapt these things, then just do. And then we're coming up to the final part here. So now we've got the basic base of our cake. So for this, I'm going to use some red felt, and all we need to do is cut a semicircle out. got our semicircle, we just fold it in half so it's in a quarter shape, and we're going to stitch along that seam there to close that. Now with this embroidery floss, it comes in 6 strands, so I'm going to just split it down because I don't want to use it really thick, so I'm just going to use 3. You can split them down into 6 single strands or variations of that. So I'm just going to do a whip stitch on this, which is where you just go over and over and over in a kind of sort of like a spiral really. So you're just going in the front, out the back, in the front, out the back, and just go along in small couple of millimetre apart, and then just double stitch over itself at the end and tie that off so that's secure, and we can trim that. So now you've got like a little hat. So all you want to do is turn that inside out, just push the bottom a little bit, and that's the bottom of your strawberry. And then we're just going to put a running stitch around this edge, so that's one that you can actually gather, which is what we want to do to make the strawberry shape. So I'm going to start from the inside here, and we're just going to be going in, out, in, out. Okay, so we're just going to do a running stitch now, in and out all the way around the edge. So this rim, you'll end up back at the seam where you started. So just come up there, and that will gather, and that will give you your strawberry. So we just need a little bit of stuffing in there. That. So we've got a nice plump strawberry there. Just going to put a few stitches across just to hold it all together. And then we'll add some leaves. So for the leaves of this, I tend to cut a shape that's kind of a bit like a 4-leaf clover, because then you add a little running stitch in there and it puckers it up. So we'll show you how to do that. And then I'm just going to stitch a running stitch in the middle there in a circle, and then in, out, the same as we did at the top of the strawberry, just in a circle shape, and that will gather up and look like the top of a strawberry. And I just turn it over and add a couple of stitches to hold that in place there, so that's nice and secure. Then we can just stitch that onto the top of your strawberry there. So now we've got a little strawberry, and I'm going to stitch him onto here. But first I'm going to take a bit more of the jam colour, and I'm going to make a little blob of jam on the top, kind of splashy jammy shape. I want him on there. That's it on top. Right, so I think that's a nice position. So I'm just going to do a little whip stitch around the edge there to attach him. So up from the back so we don't see the knot. And I just make a little stitch. So I came up through both pieces of felt and then down just through the pink. And trim that. So you can see how if you had different colours you could make so many different types of cakes. So that could be a splash of cream. Sits. So he's just tacked on there now. The other thing you can do with the strawberry is add on a few little seeds. I'm going to come straight up the back and out through the strawberry. And just do some tiny little stitches. So you come down a bit further and then come up further away, and that will give you something that looks like a seed, and this is called seed stitch, funnily enough. So just a little bit further away and then come up where you want your next seed to be. I'll do another row here, and with that you don't really need to tie it off because you will lose the end in all of the hollow fibre stuffing anyway, so you can just pull it out. Let's stitch this on. So you just want to make sure that you've got enough overlap on the back edge for when we do that at the end. Careful you don't get your strawberry tangled in it. So next we're going to come round and stitch up the back, but before that I just want to add the stuffing and the other piece of cardboard. So I don't want to stitch along here particularly because I need that room to get the card in. So let's keep that out of the way. I'm going to leave it all on there because I'm going to continue using that same piece of thread. So all we're going to do is get our stuffing and come in through this gap here, and we want to get right to the front. Sometimes like a paintbrush or some scissors can be a bit persuasive here. There, so he's got some nice sturdiness to him now. Now I'm going to cut a curve on the front point because that will often get caught on the felt as you try and push it in. So I don't want that to happen. I'm just going to take the front off like that and then push him in. And what I like to do is just add a tiny little bit above that piece of cardboard just to give some kind of shape to the top part. So I'm going to carry on with my blanket stitch and seal that up, and then that's the cake done, and we can make some whipped cream to pop on the top. Okay, so there we have the final cake with his little strawberry. I'm going to make the whipped cream. All you need to do is draw a circle on your felt. I'm just using my glue pot. I'm going to draw around him and cut him out. I'm just going to cut inside the felt tip line because I don't want it to have purple edges. So now what we want to do is cut inward, top and bottom, side to side, and then in each of the gaps in between, so each of the 4 corners if it were a square. And you need to keep them pretty much the same length of cut because you're going to be folding them, so if they're different you'll get a kind of warping. So I fold it in half and do one at the top. So I've got my 2 there, and then I fold it in half the other way. Do my top one there, so I've got my 4 corners, and then just fold in the diagonal and cut down there. So you've got all your slits all the way around, so you want to cut from the tip of one to the bottom of the next, all the way around, and what you'll end up with is this kind of shape. So you can see I've cut from the tip of that one down to the bottom of the next slit and then repeated that, so you end up with this kind of swirly sun. It's going to go ahead and do that. There we go. Got our Catherine wheel shape. Okay, so all we're going to do is stitch. I'm going to use cotton floss now. This is the kind you'd use on a machine. What we're going to do is make a little securing stitch. So I have knotted it, but it tends to slip through felt quite easily because it's so thin. So just pop a little stitch on there, like a double stitch, and that will just hold it a bit better. So now we're going to go out and then out. So from the middle out of each one as we go round, middle out, and you can see what's going to happen. It's sort of like what happened with the running stitch, which I guess it is of sorts. And then back to the beginning, back through that first one, so you've got a complete loop. And then just pull. There. So now you've got a lovely little whipped cream. So just sew them together just with a few tacking stitches, and I'm going to put a bead, a white bead in the top of mine. It goes through just to hold him nice and secure. Now these are not toys, so they're not suitable for children or animals. They are decorative. So yeah, don't let your kids get hold of them or chew them, or the dog. Tie that off through that loop, make a little knot, tie him off. There, you've got a sweet little bit of whipped cream. So I'm going to pop him on next to the strawberry. So with this, because we can't get inside, we're going to have to tack him on from here, from the outside. A couple of securing stitches on there. Don't pull too tight, and just do a couple of crossed over stitches there. And then we will just tack him on there. So I'm going to put a stitch across like that, and that will pull that to there. And all I'm going to do is just some tacking stitches through the cream and out through the felt base, so through the pink, and just go around the same way that we did this, really. So in through the icing, back out through that pink saucy bit. So you could add further sequins, you could put more splashes of the sauce maybe down the side, all sorts of things. Roses, that would be cute. You could add a little rose in there. Anything really, little buttons and beads. You can see how you could easily build up the top depending on what kind of beads. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is just pop a ribbon on the back. So I've got one that says Merry Christmas on it, but any old ribbon will do. Other ribbons are available. The reason I don't try and sort of embed them in this seam, apart from I don't think it would work very well with the blanket stitch, is that you kind of want it set slightly back so that as it hangs from here and not here, because if you hang it from here it hangs funny, but if you hang it from the middle of the back you get a better hang. But I think these are a lovely little gift. Like, some people, they have everything, don't they? And they don't really need anything, and you can't think what to get them. And these are really just a really cute idea, and it's nice because you've kind of spent a couple of hours making it, so it's thoughtful and it's perfect for Christmas, and they're just really a delight to sort of have on the tree. I guess, you could make like Easter ones, and imagine a Halloween cake. That would be amazing. And also another idea I did have, which I thought was quite cool, if you made them quite flat, you could make bunting. Can you imagine cake bunting? Oh my goodness. I need to just start a felt cake shop, I think, because I just love doing this so much. It just brings me such pleasure. So there's really no end. Also lace, you can use laces. That's another nice thing to do, is if you cut a piece of lace and then do a running stitch along the edge, just in and out. You can see where I'm going with this. It does not have to be neat because you won't see the middle at all. Pull that really tight, a couple of stitches through there. So you can just tuck that in. Just tuck that on. So yeah, all sorts of things you can do. So I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial and have a lovely time at the Christmas Tree Festival. Thank you for watching and have a really lovely Christmas.